Good morning. We have a big day ahead of us. We got a couple things we need to do. We're finally going to talk about part 3, the final installment of the story on how I became a social worker or a therapist. By now, you know that social workers can actually be therapists. The other thing though is I'm packing the camera bag because I am going to go out and film this video that you're watching outside, because inside is kind of boring and it's been getting old, probably for you and definitely for me. The problem is though that it's been really hard to find a quiet and private spot to film outside. I live in New York City, so wherever you go there's tons of noise and there's tons of people. My goal today is going to be to find a place that has minimal people and minimal noise. I'm not sure that's going to happen, but we're going to give it a shot. I have a strict timeline. I have to go pick up my son in about 2.5 hours, which really doesn't give me much time. So while I pack this bag, let me share with you the first part of That's weird. The first part of part 3. So anyway, if you haven't seen the other videos, watch part 1 and 2. But by now in the story, we're at the point where I have a social work job in the hospital, but it's part-time, right? Part-time social work, a part-time HR, and I also have an evening side gig downtown in Manhattan. Well, it's technically Midtown, working in a substance abuse facility, and I'm doing clinical work there. So all is well. I'm getting good clinical experience. I'm getting good supervision. I do like the HR role, but after some time, I really want a full-time clinical position in the hospital. Now, if you remember from the second video, the director of the department had told me, you're gonna need to leave and come back.
Go, Marvin, run home! Run home?
But I was determined to not leave and not have to come back. I was just gonna get a clinical position. So I decided to start applying for internal positions throughout the hospital, right? Different social work positions, clinical in nature. I'm firing off my resume to different people. I am sending applications in, and this is all within the same hospital, like where I work. I'm getting nothing back. I'm getting like no interviews, no responses back. It's just like crickets. And I'm confused, right? Like I perform well at work. I have good performance reviews. There's no issues. I've got a second job at night. It shows my dedication to the profession, my desire to grow, and I'm just getting nothing. And I'm just like, what is going on here? I do start applying outside the hospital, but I really don't want to because I'm motivated. I'm not leaving and I'm not coming back. I'm just gonna stay. So I started applying for positions outside the hospital, and I actually got a couple of offers, right? This time around, I've got the experience under my belt. I get some offers, but I remember the offers were not good enough to leave. It changed the commute, the pay wasn't great. So I declined those offers. So now I'm several years into the position, HR, social work, right? And I'm actually sitting in a closet. That's right, that is the office that they ended up giving me, the closet next to the bathroom, and I actually shared the closet with another person. So I'm sitting in this closet next to the bathroom, and I'm just thinking, well, every day, when am I gonna get a different job? You know, this one's good, but it's more entry level, and I'm ready for the next step in my career. Lo and behold, I get an email from a former colleague at the substance abuse place that I work at in Midtown at night, right? This is someone I worked with there. And she even got a job inside the hospital, clinical in nature, full-time, before I did. You know why? I think she had a connection. And she says that there's a position opening up where she works. It's called the PHP, Partial Hospital Program. Now, this is a very clinical position. You're gonna be a therapist, you're doing group therapy, individual therapy, you're working with doctors. It's a great position, great learning opportunity, great clinical experience. And she said there's an opening, and she wanted to give my name to the person if I was interested. Absolutely. I think the same day, got my resume together, cleaned it up, sent it off. I finally get an interview. Now, I went through 3 interviews at the PHP, shirt and tie, buttoned up, 3 different folks, and I have 3 interviews, and now I just have to wait. Now, I'm thinking this is a popular position. There must be other people applying for this. So I'm assuming the competition is stiff. I still don't know how many other people applied to this position. So I wait, and and I finally get an email back. And guess what happened? I didn't get the job. Just kidding. I actually got the job, and I was finally on my way to a different position, full-time in the hospital, totally clinical, and I didn't have to leave. Yet, this is not the end of the story. I continue to hit more roadblocks, and that's what we're gonna talk about in just a bit. But I haven't even packed this bag. I got coffee to drink, so let me get ready and I'll tell you the story in a bit. So we're in Central Park right now, and actually the view is quite nice. But this is currently the background here. But here we are in Central Park. I actually thought it would be hard to find a quiet spot, but I actually found one. So anyway, we leave off, I get this job at PHP. So my job title is actually therapist, which is really cool. Everything I wanted, right? I'm doing individual work, I'm doing group work. Every day, I'm working with a team of psychiatrists, nurse practitioners. We do rounds. It's really, really a great program, really clinical. I'm getting tons of experience. I actually got DBT trained there through Columbia University, which was really great. And I'm just doing clinical work every day. It's awesome. I really can't express that enough. Probably the position that was the most rewarding in terms of how much I learned, how much clinical care I got to do. And it was also one of the most challenging places that I've worked as well. There's a plane going by. And people are staring at me still. I'm feeling quite weird about it. And things were going really well. And then all of a sudden the pandemic hits, the world goes into chaos. That plane hasn't left. It's like circling me. I thought it would be more quiet here. It's not really. So the pandemic hits, the world goes into chaos. We never really closed down. We continued to see clients. We were seeing them virtually for a little while, which that was completely new to us. We had never done that before. We were all in person before. But the point was that we were never really stopping our work. Now the real challenge was I have a young son. At that time, he was like an infant, and the daycare was closing, and then it was open, so childcare was not really available like it used to be. Not to mention he was young and COVID was scary. We wanted to try to keep him as safe as possible. And so the challenge became the fact that I couldn't really do the 9-to-5 schedule anymore. I was still able to work the number of hours they wanted me to and see my clients. And for a little while, the hospital I was working at was slightly flexible. They kind of allowed me to do that for a little bit. But at some point we had to go back in person, and this just didn't work. I really had to be able to have some flexibility to take care of my child at that time. And I went as far as actually having to take a furlough. That was like one of the options they said. You can take a furlough until you figure this out. And then even after the furlough, COVID never resolved at that point, and things only got more chaotic. And I called up the place I worked and I said, listen, I still want to work here. I do want to make this work. I just need to kind of work these odd hours. And although clients would have been okay with it and it would have been totally doable practically, they wouldn't allow it. I mean, it wasn't really much of a decision. I had to just stop working there. And this was probably the biggest barrier I had faced yet. Now I had to leave a position that I really enjoyed. I was learning a lot. I wasn't quite ready to leave, and I had nothing lined up at that time. And so this is my biggest challenge to date. Now I'm gonna move locations because I still feel like people are staring at me and I'm feeling very self-conscious. So I'm gonna hopefully move to somewhere where people aren't looking at me. Okay, we're in a different spot now, and there's a lot less people staring at me, but I cannot find a comfortable position to sit in. So I feel a little bit better, but I'm uncomfortable physically. Anyway, so we pick up the story where I was at, just spilled my drink. So I end up having to leave PHP, right? And this left me with not much direction. Where am I supposed to go? Now, I had always had in the back of my mind, since becoming a social worker, that I wanted to do a private practice and work for myself. I just never knew how that would happen, and I never quite felt ready. But I will say that during that furlough is when I actually started to really research private practice, not just for fun, but like, how do you start a business? What steps do you need to take? And so that is something I did invest time into doing. So when I actually left the PHP and had stopped working there, I actually had a little bit of direction, not a ton. I know I said no direction before. I wasn't quite sure what was gonna happen, but I did decide to try private practice. This was the next logical step. So the first thing I did was actually set up a business entity, and that was a PLLC. I actually made videos about how I did that if you're interested. And then the rest is history. Now, of course, I was terrified. Was this business gonna work? How am I gonna sustain myself? Are people even gonna come to my practice? And so that all did end up working out. If you're watching this, you probably know that by now. I do have a private practice and a group practice. People do in fact come to the practice, and it works quite well. It's actually a great step in my career. I really enjoy private practice. So that's actually been my journey, all the way from just wanting to help people as a little kid, all the way through now to someone who owns their own practice and business and is a social worker. I actually forgot that I actually have to go get my son, and that is a time crunch that I'm on that I actually lost track of. Thankfully, I'm still on time. I think I'm gonna make it. And thank you so much for coming along on this journey with me. It's been fun to tell you about it. And I hope you're more inspired now than you were when you first watched the video.